going to tell you next, I refer to as my wilderness experience. My job I told you about that I was hired for, the small consulting firm, I was now the vice president. I was not even settled. My moving truck had not arrived, my belongings were not here, I was still in the little hotel room, and yet I was filled with peace about being there and excited about the people that I had met, the family that had just taken me in, so to speak, Israel. And Israel walks in my office one day and he sits down, he shuts the door and he said, "Can we talk?" And I just had that, that when you hear those words, the sinking sort of feeling. And he said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, Catherine, but the reason we brought you here, it no longer exists." And I can't even tell you, it was like everything sort of went black. I was filled with anger. He said, "We also cannot pay the $9,000 in moving expenses. We're so sorry." And please keep in mind that he and I are to this day forever friends and family. So this is a bump in the road, but at the time I was so livid. Remember, I wasn't at a place, my faith muscle was very flabby, and I didn't have the wisdom and the trust to understand that there's a process with God, and it's not always a straight road. It's very crooked sometimes. It's like a roller coaster, but you're on the track if you just learn to just enjoy the ride. And so he said, "I'm sorry," and that was it. Now, I believe later they did repay me, so again, friends, but that wasn't the point. It was at the time I was just devastated, and I really looked like a fool, not only to my friends, but to my close family members. And I remember the shame that I felt when I had to tell them that it wasn't going to work out. And you have to remember, I put God's name on the line. I told people God called me, and I looked foolish. Now, I had just had that experience I shared with you about the coast and the words "well done." It was like cloud nine, but now I'm in the opposite of, where did you go, God? Where are you now? And my mother wants to rescue the situation, and she comes to California, and she's going to escort me back to Florida. We're going to drive once the truck arrives in the car and so on, and we were as if it never happened. And but I skipped a part, which I'm gonna back up for a second here and tell you that lovely gentleman, Bob D'Angelo in Orlando, they offered me my job back because I had just left, but this time in Los Angeles. So before my mother comes, I go explore Los Angeles and this opportunity, and I drove down and it was an honor that they would keep me, because I had mentioned previously that they had laid off so many people. So for them to continue to kind of hold on to me was really a real gift. But when I got down to Los Angeles, I didn't have any peace about it. And I called him and I said, "I'm so sorry. I know you've invited me here and offered to rehire me as if it never happened, but I think I'm going to pass." And I remember him saying, "Catherine, I think you're making a mistake. I think you might be making a mistake." I just didn't have peace. So I drove back to Monterey, and that's when the part I told you, my mother decides she's going to rescue the situation, and let's just kind of get back to Florida and reboot. And I understand it was like a logical thing. But I had been touched. I had been touched by God in a way that nobody but me understood. And that euphoria never left. I mean, I was down in the dumps, but I had been touched. And I wanted more of that. So we get in the car and we drive down California to Arizona, and we're at the border of Arizona, and this scene is worthy of a motion picture film. So we're at a Gracie truck stop. You know, those kind that has like 100 trucks and you can't see past the truck next to you. It's just like you're walking in a maze of trucks, and there's like some diner. And I will never forget this moment in my life. I'm sitting there with my mother and I'm eating eggs, and it was like pure silence, because I had left. We're going back to Florida. We have it all, planned out, but I don't feel good about it. And so she said, "What are you gonna do?" And I said, "I don't know, but let's just stay quiet." So with every bite of my eggs, it was a yes, and the next bite was a no, and then a yes and a no, and I got up from the table and I said, "I don't feel good. I'll be back." And I went back to the hotel room and I almost got sick. It was literally it was physically eating me to be leaving that part of the country. But I didn't have any evidence and any proof as to why I had that feeling. I look back in hindsight and I think about the word of God that says, "Let the peace of Christ be your umpire." It's so true. Wherever there's a lack of peace, and it's a good thing now. You pay attention to it. I had such a lack of peace, and I was physically ill because of it. Went back to the table. She goes, "What are you gonna do?" And I said, "I'm gonna turn my car around and I'm going back to Monterey." She said, "Well, get me to the Los Angeles airport and drop me." Turned around, dropped her, and off I went to destination nowhere. This is really a wilderness experience in my life, but it was different. It was different than Manhattan in the hotel room. It wasn't despairing. It was more like a search for God, a search for what I did. Why did He say, "Well done"? What did I do well? I left family and friends and everything and came to California. Was that what I did well? Why did I have that experience? Where did He go? So I journey up the coast, and one of the very few friends I had met through that business invited me to come live with her family temporarily, and I did. It was very humbling and very uncomfortable in a lot of ways, because nobody knew what I was doing, nor did I. I ended up interviewing in Silicon Valley, and back in the day they were just throwing jobs at people that were in, it was a very hopping time, and money, they would almost bid off over you. It was one job would go to the next, you go to 3 interviews in one day and just keep going up in salary. And so that's what I did. I ended up getting a home in Silicon Valley, and I've already posted and shared that story of my journey in Silicon Valley and my drive to work, which is where I would say that's kind of towards the end of my wilderness experience. But it was something. It was something to experience as to when you're searching. It reminds me of the verse in the Bible where I think God said to Abraham, go out to a place which I will show you when you get there. Like destination unknown, but go.